For weeks I heard chains dragging across the backyard. At 3 o'clock in the morning, every single night. I would go down, shaking. There was nothing there. My son would look at me with pity. "Dad, it's your nerves," he'd say. "You're just getting confused." Until one night, I installed a hidden camera, and I saw my own son entering the backyard, chains in hand, smiling. If this story sends a chill down your spine, subscribe. I upload real stories every day that could be yours. Tell me in the comments what state you are watching us from. My name is Robert Mondragon. I am 82 years old. I was a literature professor at New York University for 45 years. I taught entire generations. Some of my students are now congressmen, doctors, writers. They would greet me on the street with respect. "Mr. Robert," they would say, and they would stop to chat, to ask for advice, to ask about Grace. And I walked with my head held high, Grace on my arm, proud of the life we had built dollar by dollar, book by book, class by class. But that morning, at 3:15, standing barefoot in my son's backyard, shaking with cold and rage, my heart beating so hard I felt it was going to burst, I understood that none of that mattered anymore. Because when you are old, you become invisible. And the worst part is you become invisible to the ones you love most. The noise woke me up. A metallic drag, loud, rough, as if someone were pulling iron chains across the cement floor of the backyard. It wasn't a dream. I heard it clearly. So clearly, I felt the sound inside my chest. 3 times. I sat up in bed, my heart racing, my mouth dry, with that kind of fear that paralyzes you, but also forces you to move. I put my feet on the cold floor, and I felt the shiver climb up my legs. The house was dark and silent. Everyone was asleep. Oh, so I thought. I put on my slippers, grabbed the cane I barely use, but that Carl insists I take just in case, as if I were an invalid, and I went down the stairs slowly, holding onto the railing. Each step creaked under my weight. Each creak sounded like a scream in the middle of that darkness. When I reached the backyard, I opened the back door. The cold air of February hit my face like a slap. I turned on the backyard light. Nothing. Just the cement floor wet with the night's dew, shining under the yellow light of the bulb. The pots with the jasmine Grace planted with her own hands, that she cared for as if they were her children, and that now Elaine waters without any affection, just because they have to be watered. The brick wall separates it from the back alley. I walked slowly, checking every corner, every shadow, every space where something could be. Nothing. No chains. No object that could have caused that noise. But I had heard it, as clearly as I hear my own voice now, as real as the cold that chilled me to the bone. I stood there, cane in hand, feeling the cold seep through my thin pajamas, feeling the dampness of the night on my wrinkled skin, wondering if I really was losing my mind. If Grace had taken not only my heart, but also my sanity. And just then, a voice behind me made me jump. "Dad, that's enough." It was Carl. He was standing in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, his brow furrowed, and that look I knew all too well. That look of weariness, of exhaustion, of someone who is tired of dealing with something. As if I were a naughty child who won't let anyone sleep. As if I were a problem that needed solving. "It's your nerves, Dad," he said. "There's nothing here." His voice was flat, without emotion. I tried to explain to him. "Son, I heard chains. I swear it on your mother's memory. 3 times. Someone was dragging something heavy." Carl shook his head, slowly, like someone talking to a madman, like someone explaining something to someone who can't understand. No one was dragging anything, Dad. There's no one here but us. There are no chains. There is nothing. His tone was firm, definitive. There was no room for discussion. There was no room for my truth. He took my arm, not with affection, but with that impatient firmness. Come on. You'll catch a cold, and you'll be worse tomorrow. As we went up the stairs, I tried to insist. My voice was trembling. Carl, I'm not making this up. I know what I heard. He cut me off without looking at me, without even pausing. Dad, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. We'll talk tomorrow. As if my words didn't matter. As if I didn't matter. We reached my room. He released my arm, almost in a hurry. Try to sleep. And he left, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. A soft, but conclusive slam. I stayed there, sitting on the edge of my bed, my hands shaking, not from cold, but from helplessness. From that impotent rage you feel when no one believes you, when your own word is worth nothing anymore. Because the thing that hurts the most is not that they don't believe you. The thing that hurts the most is seeing in your own son's eyes that they've given up on you. That you're no longer the man you were. That you're just a bother that has to be tolerated. A senile old man who has to be endured. Until what? 3 months ago. When I buried Grace, I fell apart. She was everything to me. 42 years together, 42 years of waking up beside her, of hearing her laugh, of watching her cook, humming old songs. I watched her die in the hospital, slowly, painfully, holding my hand with the little strength she had left, looking at me with those eyes that no longer saw well, but that looked at me as if I were the only thing that existed in the world, telling me with a broken voice, almost out of breath, Robert, don't be alone. Promise me you won't be alone. I promised her I would be fine. I lied. I lied while I cried. I wasn't fine. I couldn't be fine. I went back to our house, and everything reminded me of her. Her coffee cup in the cabinet, the one with painted flowers, her shawl on the back of the armchair, still with her perfume, her scent in the sheets, which I didn't want to wash because it was the last thing I had left of her. I couldn't do it. Carl arrived on the 3rd day. He found me sitting in the living room, unbathed, unfed, staring at nothing. He hugged me. For the first time in years, he hugged me. I don't want you to be alone, Dad. Come live with me. We have space. Gary misses you. And I, broken, empty, without the strength to fight, accepted. The first few days at Carl's house were good, almost happy. Elaine, my daughter-in-law, cooked well. Not like Grace. Nobody cooked like Grace, but well. With apparent affection, Gary, my 19-year-old grandson, would come talk to me in the afternoons. He would sit next to me and ask me things. About college, about girls, about life, about my classes, about the books I had read. I would give him advice. He would laugh. There was light in his eyes when he listened to me. There was a connection. Carl would come home from work, and we would eat dinner together, the 4 of us, like a family. I felt welcomed, protected. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could survive without Grace, that maybe the promise I made her hadn't been a lie. But little by little, something changed. I don't know exactly when, but I felt it. Gary stopped coming around as much. His visits became spaced out. Elaine started answering me in monosyllables, without looking at me. And Carl started looking at me differently, as if I were a mistake he had made and now didn't know how to get rid of. As if he had taken me in out of obligation and now regretted it. Dinners became silent. I tried to converse. They would nod without listening. Their answers were automatic, empty. The noises started a month ago. The first time was a loud thud on my bedroom ceiling, as if someone had dropped something very heavy in the room above. A dull, violent sound that made the ceiling vibrate. But there is no room above. It's the final roof. I know because Carl told me when he showed me the house. I went downstairs to the living room, startled, my heart in my throat. Carl was watching TV, lying on the couch, relaxed. "Son, did you hear that?" He didn't even turn around. His eyes stayed on the screen. "Hear what, Dad?" I explained to him. The thud, the ceiling, how loud it had been. He looked at me out of the corner of his eye, barely a second. I didn't hear anything. Elaine was in the kitchen. I called her. "Elaine, did you hear a thud upstairs?" She came out wiping her hands. "No, Mr. Robert, I didn't hear anything." She hadn't heard anything either. I felt confused, disoriented. I went back to my room slowly, as if the floor were going to open up beneath my feet. But the thud had been real as my heartbeat. Only no one else had heard it. And that's where my hell began. That's where my doubt began. Then came the footsteps. Steps in the hallway. At 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Slow, heavy steps, like boots, like someone walking without hurry. I would jump up, my heart pounding. I would open my bedroom door slowly, peer out. The hallway was empty, dark, silent, as if nothing had ever been there. But I had heard them. I had felt them. One night I dared to go out. I gathered the courage I had left and walked down the hallway to Carl's room. Every step I took was an echo in that darkness. I knocked on the door. Once, twice. He opened it, disheveled, sleepy, annoyed. "What is it, Dad?" His voice had that tone of someone who can't take it anymore. I told him I had heard footsteps, that someone had walked past my door. He sighed deeply, tired, as if I were a burden he was carrying. "Dad, no one is walking. We're all sleeping. Look at me." He had been asleep. Elaine appeared behind him in her nightgown, with her hair loose, looking unhappy. "Mr. Robert, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Please." And they closed the door, slowly. But they closed it. I stayed there, in the dark hallway, shaking, feeling like a crazy person, like someone who is losing their mind and doesn't realize it. Then came the voices, low voices, murmuring, as if someone were talking in secret in the living room. Conversations I couldn't understand, but that were there. I would go downstairs barefoot, slowly, trying not to make noise, and when I reached the living room, no one was there. Only the silence, only my heart beating. The doors opening by themselves, the back door, the pantry door. I would find them open in the middle of the night, swinging gently in the draft. I would close them with trembling hands. I would check them 2, 3 times. The next morning, when I mentioned it during breakfast, Carl would say without looking at me, "Dad, that door has always been closed. No one opened it." And Elaine would nod while pouring coffee. And I started to doubt. I started thinking terrible things. Am I really losing my mind? Did Grace take my sanity with her when she left? Is the grief driving me crazy? But something inside me, something stubborn, something that comes from 45 years of teaching young people to think, to question, to not accept things without proof, told me no. Something is going on, and it's not you. You're not the one who is wrong. One morning I went down for breakfast. Elaine was making scrambled eggs. The smell filled the kitchen, but it didn't wake up my appetite. Carl was reading the newspaper, turning the pages with mechanical movements. Gary was on his cell phone, headphones in his ears, in his own world. No one greeted me. No one looked up when I entered. I sat down in silence in my usual spot. Elaine placed the plate in front of me without looking, like someone carrying out a chore. Carl turned a page of the newspaper with an annoyed sigh. I tried to speak. I needed to hear my own voice. I needed to know that I still existed. "How did you sleep?" My voice sounded weak, small. No one answered. The silence was so heavy I felt it in my chest. Gary didn't even look up from his cell phone. I felt a knot in my throat that was choking me. So this was it. I was no longer part of the family. I was a piece of furniture, an old piece of furniture that takes up space and that no one wants anymore. But they don't know how to throw away. And I understood that the noises, the voices, the doors were not the worst of it. The worst was the silence. The silence that surrounded me every time I entered a room. The silence that told me I no longer mattered, that I was already dead to them. My reading glasses disappeared one Tuesday morning. I had left them, as always, on the nightstand before going to sleep. I've done the same thing all my life, ever since Grace gave me that nightstand 30 years ago. I leave them there, next to the glass of water and the alarm clock I no longer use because I wake up by myself. It's a habit of decades, a ritual, something I do without thinking, like breathing. But that morning, when I woke up and reached out to grab them, they weren't there. I searched the nightstand, feeling with my hands, because without my glasses, I can barely see anything. Nothing. Under the bed. Nothing. I checked the floor, the sheets, the dresser, even inside the drawers, thinking maybe I had put them away by accident. Nothing. I went downstairs for breakfast, confused, squinting to see the steps. "Elaine, have you seen my glasses?" She was washing dishes, her back to me. "No, Mr. Robert, where did you leave them?" I explained to her. "On the nightstand, as always." She dried her hands on her apron and came upstairs with me. We checked together. She looked in places where I had already searched. They didn't appear. Then she opened the bathroom door, and there they were, on the sink, next to the soap, in a place where I had never, ever in my life left them. "Look, Mr. Robert, here they are." Elaine handed them to me with a kind smile, one of those smiles that doesn't reach the eyes. But her eyes said something else. They said, "Poor thing. He doesn't remember anything anymore. He's getting confused." I took the glasses with trembling hands. I looked at them as if they were strange objects, as if they weren't mine. "Elaine, I didn't leave them here, I swear. I never leave my glasses in the bathroom." My voice sounded desperate. She nodded slowly, with that condescending patience you use with children or the sick. "Sometimes we do things and don't realize it, Mr. Robert. It's normal, don't worry." But I was worried, very worried. I went down to the kitchen with my glasses on, but my mind clouded. Carl was already there, drinking coffee, reading something on his cell phone. Elaine said something quietly into his ear. I didn't catch what. I saw Carl look at me out of the corner of his eye with that expression of feigned concern that I hated so much. That expression that said, "Poor Dad," but that was really thinking, "This is going to be a problem." I didn't say anything. I adjusted my glasses well on my nose, but inside something twisted, because I knew, with every cell in my body, with every fiber of my being, that I had not left those damned glasses in the bathroom. 3 days later, my pills disappeared. I take pills for my blood pressure, 2 every morning with breakfast. I keep them in a white bottle that I always, always, leave in my dresser drawer. That morning I opened the drawer, as I did every morning. They weren't there. The drawer was there with my usual things, my handkerchief, my wallet, Grace's picture, but not the pills. I searched all the drawers. I opened all of them. I checked them one by one. Nothing. The panic started to rise in my chest. I need those pills. I ran down to the kitchen. Has anyone seen my pills? My voice was louder than normal. Carl was eating toast with jelly. He looked up slowly. What pills, Dad? I explained. The blood pressure ones, the white bottle, the one that's always in my drawer. He frowned. He chewed slowly. He swallowed. Did you look carefully? Sometimes they're where you don't remember. I felt like an idiot, like a child being scolded. Yes, Carl, I looked. I looked everywhere. Elaine appeared at that moment from the living room with the bottle in her hand, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They were on the coffee table in the living room, Mr. Robert, next to the magazines. She said it so naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, as if I took my pills for a walk around the house. I froze. I had never taken my pills to the living room. Never. It made no sense. Carl put the toast down on his plate. He looked at me seriously, his eyes narrowed. Dad, this is happening too often. His tone was soft at first, but there was something hard underneath. Firm, authoritarian. What is? I asked, although I knew perfectly well what he was referring to. I knew it, and I was afraid to hear it. You're losing things, leaving them in strange places and not remembering. The glasses, now the pills. Yesterday you asked me twice where Gary was when he was sitting right there in the living room. Had I asked that? I didn't remember. Or maybe I did. I wasn't sure. I tried to defend myself. Son, I didn't leave the pills in the living room. I never take the pills. He raised his hand, cutting me off as you cut off someone who can no longer understand. Dad, listen to me. It's not your fault. I'm not blaming you. At your age, it's normal to have confusion, little forgetfulness. It's part of the process. At my age. That damned phrase again. As if 82 years were a disease. I'm not confused, Carl. My voice came out louder than I wanted, almost a shout. He sighed deeply, rubbed his face. Dad, I think we should consult someone. A doctor. Just to be sure. To rule things out. The floor opened beneath my feet. A doctor? For what? To tell me I'm crazy? Carl stood up, approached, put a hand on my shoulder. A heavy hand. To take care of you, Dad. To make sure you're okay. That it's nothing serious. But his look said something else. His look said, to confirm what we already know. That you're losing your mind. That you're no longer useful. That we have to do something with you. Elaine nodded from the kitchen, wiping her hands. It's for the best, Mr. Robert. My aunt went through the same thing a few years ago. It started the same way. Losing things. And it's better to be proactive. It's better to know what's happening before it's too late. Proactive about what? My madness? My death? Rage rose in my chest. Then humiliation. And after that, a deep, visceral fear. Because if everyone around me was telling me I was confused, what if it was true? What if I really was losing my mind and didn't realize it? What if Grace had taken not only my heart, but also my sanity when she left? That doubt terrified me more than any nighttime noise, more than any open door. The appointment was 2 days later. Carl drove me in his car. I was quiet, slumped in the passenger seat, looking out the window at the streets of New York that I knew so well. Streets I had traveled thousands of times with Grace. We passed in front of NYU, where I taught for decades. I saw the students going in, laughing, pushing each other, alive, full of future. I felt a painful nostalgia pierce my chest. That was my world. Those young people had been my life. And now I was going to a doctor to confirm that I was no longer of sound mind, that I was no longer useful. We arrived at a private clinic in the Upper East Side, modern, cold, impersonal, smelling of disinfectant and air conditioning. Carl parked and opened the door for me as if I couldn't do it myself, as if I were an invalid. We went in. The receptionist smiled at us with empty professionalism. "Dr. Harrison is waiting for you. Please go in." Dr. Alan Harrison was a man in his 50s, thin, with thick-rimmed glasses and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. One of those professional smiles that you put on and take off like a mask. He welcomed us into his office. White walls, diplomas in gold frames hung perfectly aligned, a desk of dark, polished wood without a speck of dust. He indicated a chair in front of him. Carl sat next to me, too close. The doctor opened a folder with my name written on it. "Well, Mr. Robert, tell me, how have you been feeling lately?" He started with easy questions, the ones anyone can answer. My name, my age, what year it was, what city, what day it was today. I answered everything correctly, quickly, without hesitation. But then came more personal, more painful questions. "Your wife, when did she pass away?" I swallowed. I felt my throat close up. 3 months ago. My voice broke a little. He wrote something down in his notebook. "And how have you been handling that loss? Have you had episodes of deep sadness? Crying? How do you handle losing the person you shared your whole life with? How do you handle burying your soulmate? You don't handle it. You survive. Barely. Just barely." After several minutes of questions that made me feel like a specimen in a laboratory, the doctor asked me to step out for a moment. "I need to speak with your son alone, Mr. Robert. It's routine, standard procedure." I nodded. I got up slowly. My knees cracked. I went out into the hallway. I sat on one of those uncomfortable waiting room chairs, upholstered in fake green leather. From there, even though the door was closed, I could hear murmuring. Carl's voice, the doctor's voice. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. They were talking about me, deciding about me, designing my future without me being present, as if I wasn't there, as if I had no voice or vote over my own life. I remembered when Carl was 7 years old and had the chicken pox. I carried him to the doctor in my arms because he didn't want to walk, because his whole body hurt. He cried the whole way. "I don't want a shot, Dad. I'm scared." I stroked his sweaty hair. I spoke softly. "They won't give you a shot, son. They'll just check you out. Dad's here. Nothing bad is going to happen." And I was right. The doctor checked him, gave him cough syrup, and Carl hugged me, relieved. "Thanks, Dad." I was his protector, his hero, the one who chased away the fears. Now the roles were reversed. Now I was the scared child, and he was the adult who decided for me. They called me back in. The door opened. I entered. Carl had a serious expression, almost grave. The doctor did too. They were prepared. They had reached conclusions. I sat down. I felt like the chair was too low, that they were above and I was below. Harrison clasped his hands on the desk, fingers interlaced, and looked at me with that professional pity that I hate so much. That pity that says, "Poor old man," without saying anything. "Mr. Robert, I've spoken with your son. He tells me you've been having episodes of confusion lately. Objects appearing in places you don't remember leaving them. Noises that no one else hears. Even some repetition in conversations. I tried to interrupt. I wanted to defend myself. Doctor, He raised his hand gently but firmly. Please let me finish. It's important that you hear this. And I stayed seated, silent, feeling myself being condemned. This is not uncommon, Mr. Robert. It's not unusual. After a significant loss, like your wife's, it's common for the brain to react in unexpected ways. Confusion, disorientation, even mild auditory hallucinations, it's a response to emotional trauma. Hallucinations. That word hit me like a punch to the gut, like a knife. Doctor, I'm not hallucinating. What I hear is real. What I see is real. I know the difference between real and imaginary. I was a professor for 45 years. I taught logic. The doctor nodded condescendingly. With that patience you have with crazy people. I'm sure it is to you, Mr. Robert. I'm sure you feel it as real. But that doesn't mean it's objectively real. The mind can play tricks on us, especially at your age and after a trauma. Objectively real? What did that mean? That my reality no longer counted? That what I lived, felt, heard, saw was no longer valid? That I was no longer a reliable witness to my own life? Carl intervened, leaning forward. Doctor, what can we do? Is there a treatment? The doctor took out a prescription pad. He started writing with an expensive pen. I'm going to order some tests. Nothing invasive, nothing painful. An electroencephalogram, blood work, a simple CT scan. And in the meantime, we're going to start a mild treatment to help you rest better, to calm the anxiety. Treatment. Another word that sounded like a condemnation. Another word that meant they had already given up on me. We left the office. Carl had the prescription in his hand, folded carefully, stored in his pocket as if it were an important document, as if it were a sentence. I walked behind him, feeling small, tiny, invisible. In the car, on the way back, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, dense, full of unspoken things. When we arrived home, Carl helped me out of the car, even though I didn't need help. He put his hand on my back. Dad, you're going to be okay. You just have to trust us. We're going to take care of you. Everything is going to be fine. But his voice didn't sound comforting. It didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a farewell. As if he had already decided that I was no longer the man I was. That I was just a confused old man who needed to be controlled. And that night, lying in my bed, looking at the dark ceiling, listening to the heavy silence of that house that wasn't mine, I felt something break inside me. Something deep. Something that I didn't know if it could ever be fixed again. And I wondered, for the first time with real terror, if I really was losing my mind. A week after the diagnosis, Carl asked me to go with him to the bank. We have to update some paperwork, Dad, about the house. I nodded without understanding much. The house, our house, the one Grace and I bought decades ago with my barely sufficient professor's salary, that house I left closed up when I came to live with my son. We arrived at the Chase Bank on Park Avenue. It was hot. The line was long. Carl took me directly to the manager's desk, a certain Mr. Morales. Morales was a man in a gray suit and red tie who greeted us with that mechanical kindness of someone who serves hundreds of people a day. We sat down. The manager opened a folder. Good, Mr. Mondragon. We are here to process the power of attorney, correct? Power of attorney. I didn't understand. I looked at Carl. He nodded. The manager handed me some papers. "I just need you to sign here, Mr. Robert." I took the pen. But before signing, something made me stop. "What am I signing?" I asked. Carl leaned forward, almost taking the papers out of my hands. "Dad, it's just house paperwork, so I can help you with the payments, the accounts, those things." I tried to read. The letters were blurry. The manager cleared his throat awkwardly. And then Carl said it. Loudly. Clearly, in front of the manager, in front of the passing employees, in front of the woman waiting in the chair next to us. "My dad no longer handles numbers well, sir. That's why I'm here." I felt my face burn. Everyone looked at me. The manager nodded with feigned understanding. The woman next to me looked away with pity. I tried to defend myself. "Carl, He interrupted me with a soft but firm gesture on my shoulder. "Dad, let me handle it. You just sign here." He put the pen in my hand. He pointed to the line. I looked at the papers. The words danced before my eyes. Power, representation, assets. I felt like something very important was happening, and I didn't fully understand it. But Carl was there, waiting. And the manager too, and people were looking. So I signed. My hand trembled as I wrote my name, Robert Mondragon, and I felt that with that signature I was handing over something I would never get back. We left the bank. Carl walked ahead, putting the papers in his leather briefcase. I walked behind, feeling exposed, humiliated. He no longer handles numbers well. How dare he? I had managed my household finances for 40 years. I had paid for Carl's college with my professor's salary. I had saved dollar by dollar to buy that house. And now he was telling me, in front of strangers, that I was no longer capable of it. I wanted to complain. But when I opened my mouth, only a tired sigh came out. Because a part of me was starting to believe what everyone was telling me, that I was no longer capable, that I was no longer useful, that I was just a nuisance. 2 days later, Elaine asked me to go with her to the pharmacy. "I need to buy your medicine, Mr. Robert. You're out." We walked to the CVS on the corner. I knew that place well. I had gone thousands of times. The pharmacist was a young woman named Lucy, always kind. Elaine gave her the prescription. Lucy started looking for the medicines on the shelves. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Robert, are these the same ones you always take?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Elaine spoke first. "Yes, Lucy, they are the same. He doesn't remember the schedule well anymore, but I give them to him." Lucy nodded, looking at me with pity. I stood there, quiet, invisible, while they talked about me as if I wasn't present. They paid. We left. Elaine carried the bag of medicines. I walked in silence. Why hadn't I defended myself? Why hadn't I said that yes, I did remember my schedule, that I'd been taking those damned pills for years? But I didn't. Because something in me was already broken. Something that made me doubt myself. That made me think, maybe they are right. Maybe I don't remember anymore. Maybe I am losing my mind, and I'm the only one who doesn't realize it. That doubt was worse than any humiliation. Because when you doubt your own mind, you have nothing left to hold on to. The next day, I went for a walk alone. I needed air. I needed to get out of that house that felt more and more like a prison. I walked through the streets of the Forest Hills neighborhood where Carl lived. Clean streets, big houses, people I didn't know. I passed a convenience store, a small park where some children were playing. I sat on a bench to rest, and then I heard my name. "Mr. Robert, is that you?" I turned around. It was Betty Sanchez, Carl's neighbor, a woman in her 60s, always well-dressed, always with that kind, but curious smile. "Mrs. Sanchez, good to see you." She sat next to me. She smelled of expensive perfume. She looked at me with that expression I already knew. Pity, sympathy. "Mr. Robert, is everything okay?" Her tone was that of someone who already knows the answer. "Yes, Mrs. Sanchez, everything is fine." She nodded slowly, like someone who doesn't believe what they hear. Then she lowered her voice as if she were about to share a secret. "It's just... Carl told me you've been a little forgetful lately." I felt a knife stab me. Carl, my own son, talking about me with the neighbors, telling them I was losing my mind. I tried to smile. "No, Mrs. Sanchez, I'm fine, just adjusting to living here." She patted my hand. "Oh, Mr. Robert, I understand. My mother went through the same thing. It's difficult, but you have to accept it." "Accept what? My madness? My uselessness?" I got up from the bench. "Excuse me, Mrs. Sanchez, I have to go back." She nodded. "Take good care of yourself, Mr. Robert." I walked back to Carl's house with a heavy heart. I remembered walking through the streets of New York, through Greenwich Village, around NYU. People would greet me with respect. "Mr. Robert, Professor, how are you?" "Professor Mondragon, good to see you." They would stop me in coffee shops, in bookstores, in the squares. They wanted to chat. They wanted to ask for advice. They wanted to know about Hemingway, about Faulkner, about Morrison. I was someone. I was a man with substance, with a history, with dignity. And now I was the scatterbrained old man that people whispered about. When I entered the house, Carl was in the living room watching TV. He didn't greet me. I went up to my room. I sat on the bed. I took out my wallet. Inside was the photo of Grace, the same one I had carried since the day she died. I looked at her. Her brown eyes, her soft smile, her hair pulled back in that bun that I liked so much. "My love, what is happening?" I asked her quietly. She just smiled in the photo. She had no answers. I put the photo away again, and I realized that I had not only lost my wife, I had lost my dignity, my voice, my place in the world. And the worst part was that I didn't know how to get it back. I didn't even know if I wanted to try. That night, during dinner, Carl said something that chilled me to the bone. We were eating in silence. Elaine was serving soup. Gary hadn't even come down. Carl cut a piece of bread and without looking at me said, "Dad, I spoke with the doctor. He says if the episodes continue, maybe it would be better to look for a place where they can take better care of you, where there are nurses, where you won't be alone." A place. He didn't say nursing home. He didn't say psychiatric clinic, but I understood perfectly. I put my spoon down on the plate. "You want to kick me out?" My voice trembled. Carl looked at me finally. "No, Dad. It's not about kicking you out. It's about taking care of you." But his look said something else. It said, "I've already decided." And that's when something changed inside me. Something small, something dark, a spark of rage. Because for the first time I started to think, what if all of this isn't me? Gary stopped coming down to eat dinner with me. Before, when I first arrived, my grandson would come down every night. He would sit next to me. He would ask me things. He would tell me about college, about his friends, about the girls he liked. I would give him advice. He would laugh. There was a connection. But little by little, those dinners ended. First it was, "Grandpa, I have a lot of homework." Then, "Grandpa, I made plans with some friends." After that, he simply stopped coming down. He ate dinner in his room, and I was left at that large table across from Carl and Elaine, who ate in silence, looking at their plates, without seeing me. as if I were a ghost sitting in that chair. A ghost who ate, breathed, but who no longer existed for them. One Saturday morning, I went upstairs to look for Gary. I knocked on his bedroom door. "Gary, are you there?" I heard movement. "Yes, Grandpa." I opened the door slowly. He was sitting on his bed with his laptop open, headphones in his ears. He looked at me with that expression of someone who has been interrupted. "Is something wrong, Grandpa?" I smiled. "Nothing, son. I just wanted to talk for a while." He looked at his laptop, then at me. "Grandpa, I'm busy right now. Later?" I nodded. "Of course, son. Later." I closed the door and stood in the hallway. Later, always later. But that later never came, and I understood that my grandson, whom I loved so much, had also distanced himself. I don't know if it was because they asked him to or because he couldn't stand to see me like that. But he distanced himself. I tried calling him from my cell phone. I dialed his number. It rang 3 times. Gary answered. "Grandpa?" His voice sounded strange, uncomfortable. "Gary, son, why don't you come down and talk to me anymore?" There was a long silence. Too long. "Grandpa, Dad says you need rest, that we shouldn't bother you too much." Bother? I had never said that. I had never asked for it. "Gary, I don't need rest. I need company. I need to talk to you." Another silence. "Grandpa, I have to go. Talk to you later, okay?" And he hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone. And I felt something inside me break a little more, because even my own grandson was abandoning me. My friends also started to disappear. I have 3 lifelong friends, Tim, Eddie, and Mike. All 3 were also teachers. We've known each other for over 40 years. Every Sunday, we would meet at the downtown coffee shop to play dominoes and talk about everything. But since I moved in with Carl, those meetings stopped. They still called. Or at least, they tried. One Sunday morning, the house phone rang. I was in the living room. Carl answered. "Hello? Oh, Tim. Yes, he's here. But he's resting right now. Should I tell him to call you back? Okay. Take care." And he hung up. He didn't pass the call to me. He didn't tell me. He just hung up. "Who was that?" I asked. Carl didn't even turn around. "A friend of yours. I told him you were resting." I stood up, annoyed. "Carl, I wasn't resting. I was sitting right here. Why didn't you pass the call to me?" He sighed, like someone tired of explaining the same thing over and over. "Dad, because you need to rest. You can't be on the phone all day. The doctor said so." The doctor? Dr. Harrison had never said that. I tried to grab the phone to call Tim back. Carl put it in his pocket. "You can call him later, Dad. Relax now." Later. Always later. And that later never came, because every time my friends called, Carl answered. And always, always, he told them the same thing. He's resting, he's busy, he doesn't feel well. Little by little, they stopped calling, and I was left without them. One afternoon, I tried to use my cell phone to call Eddie. I unlocked the screen, I looked for his contact, I dialed. But the phone didn't respond. The screen froze. I tried again. Nothing. I went down to the living room. "Carl, my cell phone isn't working." He looked up from the newspaper. "Let me see." I gave it to him. He looked at it for a moment. "Dad, I think several things got messed up. It's better if I get you a simpler one. These smartphones are too complicated for, well, you know. For you, for your age, for your condition." He didn't say it, but he thought it. He kept my cell phone. "I'll fix it." But he never returned it to me. And when I asked, he told me it was broken, that he was going to buy me another one. But that other one never arrived. And so I was left, without a phone, without calls, without a voice. I remembered when this house was different. When Grace and I lived in our house in Brooklyn, New York, on Sundays, friends would come over, fellow teachers, former students. The house would fill with voices, with laughter, with discussions about books, about politics, about life. Grace would make coffee. I would take out my dominoes board. We would play until the afternoon. Tim always cheated. Eddie always caught him. Mike would laugh at both of them. And I was happy. Because my house was a living place. A place where people wanted to be. And now I lived in a silent house, where no one talked to me, where no one visited me. One afternoon I went down to the kitchen. Elaine was cooking. I approached slowly. "Elaine, can I use the house phone?" She stopped chopping onions. She looked at me strangely. "What for, Mr. Robert?" "To call my friends," I wanted to say. "To hear a voice that isn't yours. To feel that I still exist outside these four walls." But I only said, "To make a call." She wiped her hands on her apron. "Ask Carl. He'll be home in an hour." It wasn't a direct refusal. It was worse. It was a, "I don't trust you to use the phone alone." And I realized that even the house phone was out of my reach, as if they were afraid I would call someone, that I would tell something, that I would ask for help. If you're listening to my story, please tell me in the comments what state you are watching us from. Sometimes, knowing that there is someone out there listening to me gives me the strength to keep telling this. Because believe me, there were moments when I wanted to give up, when I wanted to accept what everyone was telling me, that I was crazy, that I was confused, that it was better to just go with it. But something deep inside told me no, that this wasn't normal, that a son doesn't isolate his father like this, that a family doesn't treat someone they supposedly love this way. And that little stubborn voice was the only thing that kept me sane in the midst of all that madness. That night, lying in my bed, I looked at the dark ceiling and thought about everything I had lost in those 3 months. I lost Grace. I lost my house. I lost my phone. I lost my friends. I lost the conversations with my grandson. I lost my dignity at the bank, at the pharmacy, on the street. I lost my voice. And the worst part is that all of it had been taken from me slowly, carefully, with soft words and false smiles. "It's for your own good, Dad. It's to take care of you. It's for your safety." And I had let it happen because I was weak, because I was alone, because a part of me truly believed I was losing my mind. But that night something changed. I don't know what exactly it was. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was the last bit of pride I had left. But there, in the darkness of that room, that wasn't mine, in that house that didn't feel like home, I made a decision. I wasn't going to give up. Not yet. Because if I really was losing my mind, then I had nothing to lose by investigating. And if I wasn't losing it, then someone was making me believe I was. And that, believe me, was much worse. Because it meant that my own son, the person I trusted most after Grace, was betraying me. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel fear. I felt determination. Small, fragile, but there. And I held on to it like someone clinging to a life raft in the middle of a storm. The next night, I decided to stay awake. I wasn't going to take the pills Elaine left on my nightstand every night. The ones that were supposedly to help me sleep better. That night, when she came up with a glass of water and the 2 white capsules, I took them in front of her. "Good night, Mr. Robert." She closed the door. I waited 5 minutes. I went to the bathroom. I spit them out. I flushed them down the toilet. I went back to bed. I lay down dressed, with my clothes on under the covers. I turned off the light, and I waited. My heart was pounding. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew that if the noises were real, if someone was making them, tonight I was going to find out. 2 hours passed. Nothing. Just the dense silence of the sleeping house. I started to doubt. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe it was all my imagination. But just when I was about to give up, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, careful, in the hallway. They were coming from the stairs. They were getting closer. They passed in front of my door. They continued toward Gary's room. I waited a moment. Then slowly, I got up. I opened my door without making a sound. The hallway was dark, but I managed to see a shadow going down the stairs. A shadow that wasn't Carl's. Younger, thinner. I went down behind it, holding on to the railing, barefoot so as not to make a sound. I reached the living room. The shadow was gone, but the back door to the yard was ajar, and I felt a draft of cold air. I went out to the backyard. The moonlight illuminated everything with that silvery tone that makes things seem unreal. I looked around. No one. But then I saw it. On the cement floor, next to the jasmine pots, there were footprints. Footprints of shoes. Fresh, wet with dew. I examined them closely. They were sneakers, running shoes, large size, with a zigzag pattern on the sole. I wear slippers in the house. Carl wears dress shoes. Elaine wears flats. Gary, well, Gary never comes down at this hour. And besides, these footprints came from outside, from the back gate that leads to the alley. Someone had entered. Someone who didn't live here. And I had the proof. I went back up to my room, my heart pounding, not from fear, from excitement, from relief, because those footprints meant something crucial. I wasn't crazy. Someone was entering this house. Someone who shouldn't be here. I sat on my bed, shaking. Not from cold, but from adrenaline. I searched the drawer of my dresser. I found an old notebook I had brought from my house, one where Grace wrote down recipes. There were blank pages at the end. I took out a pen, and I wrote, with trembling but clear handwriting, night of Thursday, February 13th, at 2:40 a.m. Sneaker prints in the backyard. Zigzag pattern. Someone entered through the back gate. I hid it under the mattress. It was my first record. My first piece of evidence. And I felt that for the first time in months, I was in control of something. The next day, I went downstairs early. The backyard floor was already dry. The footprints had disappeared. But I had seen them, and I had written them down. Elaine was preparing breakfast. I approached carefully. "Good morning, Elaine." She greeted me without turning around. "Good morning, Mr. Robert?" I asked her, trying to sound casual. "Did anyone come over last night? I heard noises." She stopped stirring the eggs. She looked at me. "No, Mr. Robert. No one came over. We all slept." But there was something in her voice, a small doubt, a hesitation. And I knew she was lying, or at least that she knew something she wasn't telling me. Carl walked in at that moment. "What's going on?" Elaine looked at me. I just shook my head. "Nothing, just asking." 2 days later, a Sunday afternoon, I was sitting in the living room. Carl and Elaine had gone out to run errands. Gary was locked in his room. I took the opportunity to walk around the house. I wanted to look for something, anything, any other sign that I wasn't imagining things. I walked down the hallway that leads to the bedrooms, and I smelled it. Smoke. The smell of a cigarette. Fresh, recent. I stopped. I followed the smell. It was coming from the guest room, the one at the end of the hallway that no one uses. I opened the door. The room was empty. But the smell was unmistakable. Cigarette smoke. And no one in this house smokes. Not Carl, not Elaine, not Gary. I quit smoking 20 years ago when Grace begged me to. I searched the room. I checked the wastebasket. Nothing. I checked under the bed. Nothing. But the smell was there. Someone had smoked in this room. And recently. I went back to my room. I took out the notebook. Sunday, February 16th, 4:30 p.m. Smell of cigarette smoke in the guest room. No one in the house smokes. I put the notebook away and I started to feel like I was putting something together. A puzzle. The pieces didn't fit together completely yet. But I wasn't blind anymore. I wasn't defenseless anymore. I was observing. I was recording. And that gave me a strength I hadn't felt in months. That same afternoon, while Carl was watching TV in the living room, I approached to sit with him. I wanted to seem normal, not to raise suspicion. I sat on the couch. The TV was on a news channel. Carl was flipping through channels with the remote. But then, as I shifted, my foot hit something under the sofa. I bent down. It was another remote control. I took it out. I looked at it. It wasn't the TV remote. It was smaller, black, with buttons I didn't recognize. "What is this?" I asked, showing it to Carl. He turned around. For a second, just 1 second, I saw something in his face. Surprise, alarm, but he quickly disguised it. "Oh, that one. It's for the old stereo system we have stored away. It must have fallen." He took it from my hand. He put it away. But I had seen his reaction. That fraction of a second where he didn't know what to say, where he was caught. I went up to my room. I took out the notebook. Sunday, February 16th, 6:00 p.m. Strange remote control under the sofa. Carl got nervous when he saw it. I closed the notebook. I sat on the bed. And for the first time in months, I smiled. A bitter smile, yes, but a smile nonetheless. Because I realized something important. I was a professor for 45 years. I taught logic. I taught my students to question, not to accept things as they are presented to them, to seek the truth behind appearances. And now, after so long letting myself be led, after so long doubting myself, that professor was waking up. That night, during dinner, I observed Carl with different eyes. No longer with the eyes of the father grateful that his son took him in, but with the eyes of the investigator. And I noticed things. I noticed how he constantly looked at his watch, how he exchanged glances with Elaine, how he became tense every time I spoke. And I wondered, why is he in such a hurry? Because that was evident. Carl was in a hurry for something. The quick diagnosis, the mention of a place where they could take better care of me, the bank papers. Everything was happening too fast, as if he had a deadline, as if he needed to resolve something urgently. And that made me think, what does Carl need from me? What does he gain by making me believe I'm crazy? That question kept me awake. I stayed up late, looking at the ceiling, thinking. The house. That was the most obvious answer. Our house in Brooklyn. The house Grace and I bought. It's worth money. A lot of money. New York City has grown. Property prices have skyrocketed. And I had signed those papers at the bank. Power of attorney. Representation. What exactly had I signed? I had given Carl the power to sell my house. To sell it without me knowing. I sat up in bed, sweating. If they institutionalized me, if they declared me mentally incompetent, Carl would have total control. He could sell the house, keep the money. And I couldn't do anything, because I would just be a crazy old man in a nursing home. That thought terrified me, but it also gave me clarity. Now I knew what he was after. Now I knew why. The confirmation came 3 nights later. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I was lying down, awake, again without taking the pills. I heard movement downstairs, low voices, murmuring. I got up slowly. I opened my bedroom door without making a sound. The voices were coming from the living room. I peeked from upstairs. The lights were off, but there was a blue glow. The television was on, without volume, and 2 silhouettes were sitting on the sofa. Carl and Elaine, talking quietly. I went downstairs slowly, my heart pounding. My heart was beating so hard I thought they would hear it. I reached the last step. I hid behind the wall that divides the dining room from the living room, and I listened. "How much longer, Carl?" It was Elaine's voice. She sounded tired, frustrated. Carl sighed. "A few weeks. The bank is pressuring us. They need the deed signed before March." My blood ran cold. The deed? What deed were they talking about? Elaine spoke again. "What if he doesn't want to go? What if he makes it difficult?" There was a silence. Then Carl replied, and his voice sounded cold, calculating. "He won't be able to make it difficult anymore. We have enough with Dr. Harrison's diagnosis. If necessary, we'll ask for a full psychiatric evaluation. We'll declare him incompetent. And that's it." I felt my legs tremble. My own son, planning to declare me incompetent. "To get my house," Elaine spoke again. "But he's getting suspicious. The other day, he asked me if anyone had come over." Carl made an annoyed sound. "We have to be more careful. Tell Fred not to come over so often, only when necessary." Fred. That name hit me like a punch. Who was Fred? I had never heard that name, Elaine replied. "I already told him, but he says he has to come to move things. So your dad thinks he's losing his mind." Move things. My glasses, my pills, my keys, everything. Everything had been planned. Everything had been an act to drive me crazy, to make me doubt myself. I had to cover my mouth to keep from shouting. "And the noises?" Elaine asked. Carl laughed. A low, bitter laugh. "Those are the best. Fred comes in through the back gate, drags the chains, moves furniture, knocks on the doors, and Dad comes down scared like a child. It's perfect. Perfect." He called the psychological torture of his own father perfect. I felt a rage so great that it burned inside me. But I forced myself to stay still, to keep listening. Because I needed to know everything. I needed to understand how far this betrayal went. Elaine sighed. "Sometimes I feel bad, Carl. He's your dad." There was a silence. Then Carl spoke and his voice was harsh. "He's my dad. But that house is worth over $4 million. And I need it. So stop feeling bad." $4 million. That was my price. That was the value of 40 years of work, of life savings with grace. And my son was willing to destroy me for that money. I held onto the wall because I felt like I was going to faint. My legs wouldn't hold me. My chest hurt. But I forced myself to breathe slowly, not to make a sound. Elaine spoke again. "And Gary? Does he know?" Carl denied it. "No, and he can't know. It's better if he thinks his grandpa really is confused. That way he doesn't ask questions." My grandson. My Gary. They were deceiving him too. They were using him to isolate me, to make me feel completely alone. And then what? Elaine asked. After we sell the house, what do we do with him? I held my breath. Carl took a moment to answer. We institutionalize him. There are good clinics in Long Island, private ones. With the money from the house, we can pay for 3-4 years. And after that, we'll see. We'll see. As if I were a problem to solve. As if my life were a chore. Elaine sighed. Okay, but tell Fred to hurry. I want to be done with this. They stood up. They turned off the television. They started walking up the stairs. I backed away quickly, silently, pressed against the wall. I ran up to my room. I entered. I closed the door without making a sound. I threw myself on the bed, my heart racing. I stayed there, shaking. Not from fear, but from rage, from pain, from betrayal. Because one thing is to suspect, another thing is to know. And now I knew. I knew that my son, the child I carried in my arms, the one I taught to walk, the one I paid for college, was destroying my life for money. That he had hired someone to psychologically torture me. To make me believe I was losing my mind. To make me sign papers without understanding. To institutionalize me and take everything. I sat up in bed. I took out my notebook. And with trembling hands, I wrote down everything I had heard. Every word, every name, every detail. Night of Wednesday, February 26th, 2:15 a.m. I overheard Carl and Elaine. There's a plan. Fred comes in through the back gate. He makes the noises. He moves my things, all to drive me crazy. They want my house. $4 million. They want to institutionalize me. I put the notebook under the mattress. I lay back down. I looked at the ceiling, and for the first time in months, I cried. I cried silently so they wouldn't hear me. I cried for the betrayal, for the pain, for the loneliness. Because it's one thing to be betrayed by a stranger, but to be betrayed by your own son. That hurts in a way that has no name. I thought of Grace. Thank goodness she wasn't alive to see this. Thank goodness she left without knowing that the son we raised, the one we loved, was capable of this. I wiped my tears. I took a deep breath, and there, in that darkness, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let myself be institutionalized. I wasn't going to lose my house. But I had a problem, a huge problem. Who was going to believe me? I was the confused old man, the one who lost his glasses, the one who heard noises, the one with a medical diagnosis of mild mental confusion. If I went to the police and told them what I had heard, would they believe me? Or would they say it was part of my dementia? That I was paranoid? That I was making things up? Carl had already built an entire narrative around my madness. He had witnesses, Dr. Harrison, Elaine, the neighbors, the bank manager. Everyone thought I was mentally ill. And all I had was a notebook with notes that any lawyer could dismiss as the delusions of a senile old man. I got up. I walked to the window. I looked at the dark street, the sleeping houses, and I felt a loneliness so profound that it pierced my bones. Because I realized that I was completely alone in this. Without Grace, without friends to call, without a phone that worked, without my own money because Carl now controlled everything. Without anyone to believe me. It was my word against theirs, and my word was worth nothing anymore. Because I was the crazy one, the confused one, the one who was losing his mind. I went back to bed. I lay down. And in the middle of that darkness, I asked myself a question that terrified me. How do you defend yourself when no one believes you? How do you fight when they've taken all your weapons? I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep, because now I knew the truth. And the truth was worse than any nightmare. My son wanted to destroy me, and the worst part of all was that he was about to succeed, because I had no way to prove anything. I had no way to stop him. I had no one. I only had that notebook hidden under the mattress. I only had my mind, which everyone said was failing, and I only had my dignity, which was already in pieces. But there, in that moment of greatest despair, I remembered something I used to tell my students when they faced difficult problems. When you don't have the weapons, create the weapons. When you don't have the power, find someone who does. And when no one believes you, get proof that they can't deny. And that's when I understood what I had to do. I had to get proof. Real proof. Irrefutable proof. Proof that not even Carl could deny. The next day, after overhearing that conversation, I made a decision. I had to get evidence. Physical evidence that no one could deny. That night, I again pretended to take the pills. Elaine brought them to me as always. "Good night, Mr. Robert." I put them in my mouth, drank the water, smiled. She left. I waited. I spit them out into a handkerchief. I put them in the drawer. I already had a collection of almost 20 pills that I hadn't taken. I got dressed, lay down on the covers, and waited. If Fred was coming that night, I was going to be ready. I had my old cell phone in my hand, the one that was supposedly broken, but that I had managed to turn on. The camera didn't work very well, but it was better than nothing. The hours passed slowly. 3 o'clock in the morning. Nothing. 3:30. Nothing. I started to doubt. Maybe he wouldn't come tonight. Maybe they had changed their plans. But then, at 4:07, according to my nightstand clock, I heard it. The back gate. The creak of the rusty hinges. Soft footsteps in the yard. I got up slowly. I went to my bedroom window that faces the backyard. I pulled the curtain back just a centimeter, and I saw him. A young man, maybe 30 years old, thin with a dark cap, entering through the gate. He was carrying something in his hands. It looked like a bag. He moved with confidence. He knew the house. He knew where to step to not make noise. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would be heard throughout the house. I took out my cell phone. I tried to open the camera. The screen lit up. But when I tried to take a picture, the application froze. I tried again. Nothing. The screen remained black. I tapped the cell phone gently against my hand. Nothing. "Come on, come on," I whispered desperately. But the cell phone didn't respond. I looked out the window again. Fred was already next to the back door of the house. He took something out of his pocket. A key. He had a key. He opened the door without making a sound. He entered, and I was left there, paralyzed, with a dead cell phone in my hands, and the only proof that could have saved me escaping right before my eyes. I went down the stairs silently. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted everyone in the house to wake up and see that I was right. But when I reached the living room, Fred was gone. I heard noises in the dining room, furniture moving, then quick footsteps, the back door opening, and silence. I ran to the backyard. No one. Only the ajar gate swinging in the wind. He was gone. And I had nothing. No photo, no proof, only my word. The word of an old man everyone thought was crazy. I returned to my room, defeated. I sat on the bed with the useless cell phone in my hands. And I understood that Carl had thought of everything, even remotely blocking my cell phone. The next morning, desperate, I made a risky decision. I asked Carl to take me back to Dr. Harrison. "I need to talk to him, son. It's important." Carl looked at me, surprised. Are you okay, Dad? I nodded. Yes, I need to talk to the doctor. On the way, I mentally rehearsed what I was going to say. I had to be careful. I had to sound sane. We arrived at the clinic. The doctor received us. Mr. Robert, good to see you. How have you been feeling? I took a deep breath. Doctor, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. The doctor nodded. Carl tensed up in his chair, and I began to tell him. The conversations I had heard, Fred, the plan, everything. Dr. Harrison listened to me in silence. His expression was neutral, professional. When I finished, there was a long, too long, silence. Then the doctor looked at Carl. Could you leave us alone for a moment? Carl left. The doctor leaned forward. Mr. Robert, what you are telling me sounds very specific, very detailed. I felt a spark of hope. Because it's true, Doctor. It's all true. He clasped his hands. Mr. Robert, these conspiracy ideas, these beliefs that your family is against you, are classic symptoms of paranoia associated with early dementia. The nocturnal hallucinations, too. What you think you heard was likely a very vivid dream. I felt the floor open beneath my feet. Doctor, it wasn't a dream. I was awake. I heard every word. He raised his hand. I know, Mr. Robert, it was very real to you. But that's part of the condition. The brain confuses dreams with memories. It confuses fears with realities. I was speechless. The doctor wrote something on his prescription pad. I'm going to adjust your medication. We're going to increase the dosage. And I think it would be good to consider a deeper evaluation. Maybe a few days under observation. Observation. Institutionalization. Carl had gotten there before me. He had told him what to expect, what to say, and the doctor was already on his side. I left the office, my legs trembling. Carl was waiting for me with an expression of false concern. What did the doctor say, Dad? I didn't answer. On the way back, I was silent, looking out the window, feeling the net closing tighter and tighter. When we arrived home, I went straight up to my room. I needed my notebook. I needed to write down what had happened. I opened the door. I stopped dead in my tracks. My room was different. The bed perfectly made. The drawers closed. Everything too tidy. I approached my bed. I lifted the mattress with trembling hands. The notebook wasn't there. I looked under the pillows. Nothing. Under the bed. Nothing. I checked all the drawers. Nothing. My notebook had disappeared. And with it all my notes, all my proof. I ran down the stairs. Carl was in the living room. Where's my notebook? My voice came out louder than I intended. Carl looked up from the newspaper. Calm. Too calm. What notebook, Dad? My notebook. The one I had in my room, under the mattress. He frowned. He took something out of his pocket. My notebook. He placed it on the coffee table. This one? I took it. I opened it. My hands were shaking. Carl stood up. He approached. He put a hand on my shoulder. Dad, what is this? His voice was soft, concerned. But his eyes were cold. Elaine found it when she was cleaning. We were very worried. He looked at me directly in the eyes. All these notes. These ideas that we are harming you. I tried to explain. Carl, it's just that I heard... He interrupted me. Dad, the doctor already warned us about this. The paranoia. The conspiracy ideas. It's part of your condition. Elaine appeared from the kitchen. She was carrying something in her hands. Brochures. Colorful brochures with photos of gardens, of clean rooms, of smiling people. She placed them on the table. "Mr. Robert, we've been looking at some options. Places where they could take better care of you, where you have nurses, where you'll be safe." I looked at the brochures. Springtime Residence, St. Joseph Geriatric Center, Golden Valley Rest Home, nursing homes. They were showing me nursing homes. Carl spoke again. "It's not an easy decision, Dad. But I think we really need professional help. A place where they take good care of you, where you won't be alone." I sat on the sofa. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I looked at the brochures. Then I looked at my son, and I saw a stranger who smiled with his mouth but not with his eyes, a stranger who spoke to me sweetly, but who was destroying my life. I took my notebook. I opened it. The pages were there, my notes. But now, instead of being proof of my sanity, they were proof of my madness. Any judge, any doctor, any person who read those pages would say the same thing. Poor old man. He's paranoid. He's delusional. He's mentally ill. I closed the notebook. I placed it on my lap, and I felt that the net had finally closed. There was no escape anymore. There was no way to prove anything. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I had truly lost. The next day, Carl and Elaine left early. They had to run some errands, they said. They left me alone. Gary was in his room, locked in as always. I stayed sitting in the living room, looking at those nursing home brochures, feeling my life slipping through my fingers. But I couldn't stay there. I couldn't just wait for them to lock me up. So I made a decision. I put on my jacket, the one Grace gave me for our last anniversary. I put on my good shoes, and I left the house without asking permission, without telling anyone. I just left. I walked through the streets of the neighborhood until I found a taxi. "To Central Park, please." The taxi driver nodded. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to freedom. I arrived at Central Park, at the square where Grace and I spent our Sundays, where we ate ice cream in the afternoons, where we sat on that wrought iron bench under the big tree, just talking, looking at each other, being together. I went straight to that bench. It was empty. I sat down. I took Grace's photo out of my wallet. I looked at it. "My love, I don't know what to do," I told her quietly. People walked past me. Families, couples, children running, street vendors, life. And me there, a broken old man, talking to a photo. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath of the fresh morning air. And when I opened them, someone was standing in front of me. "Mr. Robert? Mr. Robert Mondragon?" I looked up. It was a man in his 50s, average height, with thick glasses, well-dressed. He looked at me with a mixture of surprise and joy. I didn't recognize him at first. "Yes?" I asked, confused. He smiled. "It's me, Mr. Robert. Scott Ramirez. I was your student. Class of '99. Scott. The name hit me like a lightning bolt. Scott Ramirez. The shy boy who sat in the front row, the one who always asked intelligent questions, the one who wrote detective stories. Scott, of course, I remember. My voice broke a little. He sat next to me without being invited. "Mr. Robert, I haven't seen you in years. How are you?" And there, on that bench, with that man who had been my student over 20 years ago, everything collapsed. I couldn't hold up the mask. I couldn't pretend I was fine. I broke. "Scott, I'm not fine." And I started to talk. I told him everything. Without filtering, without shame, I told him about Grace, about moving in with Carl, about the noises, about the things that disappeared, about the conversations I overheard, about Fred, about the plan, about the notebook, about the doctor, about the nursing home brochures, about everything. I talked and talked, and the words came out like a river after a dam breaks. And Scott listened. He didn't interrupt me. He didn't look at me with pity. He just listened. When I finished, there were tears in my eyes, and I felt empty, but also relieved, because for the first time in months, someone had listened to me. Scott was silent for a moment. Then he spoke. "Mr. Robert, do you remember what I do now?" I shook my head. "I'm a forensic expert. I work with the state attorney's office. I specialize in evidence analysis." He looked at me intently. "And if what you're telling me is true, and my instinct tells me it is, then it's not just family abuse. It's a crime, fraud, illegal restraint of liberty, maybe even attempted dispossession." He took off his glasses. He cleaned them with his shirt. "Mr. Robert, you taught me something very important when I was in your class. You taught me that the truth always leaves traces. Always. And if your son is doing what you say, then there are traces. We just have to find them." I felt something ignite inside me. A small spark. Hope. "Scott, but how? I don't have proof. They found my notebook. My cell phone doesn't work. The doctor is on their side. Who is going to believe me?" Scott smiled. It wasn't a mocking smile. It was the smile of someone who has a plan. "Mr. Robert, I will believe you, and I will help you get proof that no one can deny." He took out his cell phone. He made a call. "Charles, it's Scott. I need you to get me 2 micro cameras, good ones, with audio. The kind we use in undercover operations." "Yes, for today if possible." "Perfect, thanks." He hung up. He looked at me. "Mr. Robert, we are going to record everything. We are going to get video evidence, and when we have it, your son won't be able to deny anything." But I still doubted. "Scott, even if we have videos, he has doctors. He has signed papers. He has everything set up." Scott nodded. "That's why we need something else. We need a lawyer. Someone who can review those papers you signed. Someone who can initiate legal action." He paused, thinking. "Do you have a lawyer friend? Someone you trust?" I thought. "Tim, attorney Tim Barrett, my friend from youth. We studied together in college. He went into law. I went into literature, but we were always friends, until they isolated me." "Tim," I said, "I have a friend, a lawyer, but I haven't spoken to him in months. I don't know if—" Scott was already dialing. "Give me his number, Mr. Robert." I gave it to him. Scott called. "Attorney Barrett, good afternoon. My name is Scott Ramirez. I'm a forensic expert. I'm calling you because I'm with Mr. Robert Mondragon." "Your friend?" "Yes, the one. Attorney, he needs urgent help. It's a delicate situation. Could you meet with us?" "Perfect. At the downtown coffee shop in an hour. Thank you very much." He hung up. He looked at me. "He's coming." I couldn't believe it. After months of feeling invisible, of feeling like no one listened to me, suddenly there were 2 people moving to help me. 2 people who believed me. Scott put a hand on my shoulder. "Mr. Robert, you taught me never to give up, to always seek the truth. Now let me return that favor." An hour later, the 3 of us were at the downtown coffee shop. Tim arrived with his leather briefcase, his hair completely white, but his eyes still sharp. He hugged me. "Robert, brother, where have you been? I called 1,000 times." I explained everything to him again. Tim listened with an increasingly serious face. When I finished, he took out a notebook. He started taking notes. "Robert, the first thing I need are those papers you signed at the bank. I need to see exactly what you signed. If they made you sign a general power of attorney, we can revoke it. But I need to see the document." Then he looked at Scott. "Can you get the recordings?" Scott nodded. "In 2 days, I have the cameras. I'll install them myself in your son's house. Discreetly. No one will notice them." Tim continued. "Robert, I also need you to get an independent psychological evaluation with a doctor who has no relationship with your son, to prove that you are in full possession of your faculties. I know an excellent psychiatrist, Dr. Miller. She is strict but fair. If she certifies that you are okay, that certificate carries a lot of legal weight." I nodded. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't alone, that there was a plan, that there was hope. Scott spoke. "Mr. Robert, I need you to act normal in your house. Don't raise suspicion. Let them continue with their plan. The more confident they are, the more they will talk. And we will be recording everything." He looked at me intently. "Can you do that? Can you hold out for a few more days?" I looked at both of them. Tim, my lifelong friend. Scott, my former student who had become my ally. And for the first time since Grace died, I didn't feel alone. I took a deep breath. I can hold out." Tim closed his notebook. "Good. Then this is what we're going to do. Robert goes home, acts normal. Scott installs the cameras tomorrow. I'll take care of getting the appointment with Dr. Miller for the day after tomorrow. And we start building the case." He stood up. He shook my hand. "Robert, we are not going to let them do this to you. I promise you." And when I left that coffee shop, walking back to the taxi that would take me to Carl's house, I was no longer defeated. I was going with a purpose, with a plan, and with something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Scott arrived the next day in the afternoon. Carl and Elaine had gone out shopping. Gary was at college. I let him in quickly. He carried a small backpack. "Mr. Robert, these are the cameras." He took out 2 tiny devices, no bigger than a quarter. "This one goes in the living room. We'll hide it in the bookcase, among the books. It has a wide angle. It records everything. This other one goes in the hallway, above the door frame. No one will notice it." He installed them in less than 15 minutes. Efficient, professional. They have battery for 3 days of continuous recording, and they stream live to my computer. I'm going to be monitoring. He showed me his cell phone. There was the image of my living room, in real time. "Mr. Robert, act normal, and trust me." That night, I pretended to take the pills again. Elaine brought them to me as always. I put them in my mouth. I drank water. I smiled. She left. I spit them out. I lay down dressed. And I waited. I knew Scott was on the other side, watching everything. That gave me strength. At 2:37 in the morning, exactly, I heard movement downstairs. Footsteps. I peered out of my bedroom door. It was Carl. He was coming down the stairs in his pajamas, but awake, alert. I saw him go toward the electrical panel next to the kitchen. He opened the metal door, and he turned off the main circuit breakers. The house plunged into total darkness. Only the moonlight remained, coming in through the windows. My heart was pounding, but I stayed still, observing. 5 minutes later, I heard the back gate, then the kitchen door opening, soft footsteps entering. Fred. Although I couldn't see him well in the dark, I knew it was him. I heard murmuring. Carl talking quietly, quickly, moved the dining room chairs, and put his glasses in the bathroom again. Fred's voice, younger, replied. "And the chains? Later. First the inside stuff. I heard furniture dragging, objects moving, footsteps coming up the stairs. They passed in front of my door. I was paralyzed, holding my breath. They entered my room. I had left the door ajar on purpose. I heard them rummaging through my things. Grabbed the glasses. He left them on the nightstand. Fred took my glasses. He left. He went to the bathroom. He left them there. Then they went downstairs. I heard more noises, more movements. And then Elaine's voice. She was awake too. She was also part of this. "Almost done?" she asked. Carl replied, "Yes. Fred, go to the backyard, do the chains thing." Footsteps leaving. The unmistakable sound of metal chains dragging across the cement of the backyard. The same sound that had woken me up so many nights. The same sound they had told me was my imagination. It lasted about 2 minutes. Then, silence. Fred came back in. "Ready?" "Carl, perfect. Now get out of here, and don't come back until Friday." Fred left. The gate closed. Carl went back to the electrical panel. He turned on the circuit breakers. The light came back. And everyone went up to their rooms as if nothing had happened. I stayed awake the rest of the night, not from fear, but from rage, from a dark satisfaction. Because now everything was recorded. Every movement, every word, every second of that calculated torture. The next morning I went down to breakfast as if nothing had happened. I found my glasses in the bathroom. I feigned surprise. "Here again. I don't understand." Elaine looked at me with that false compassion. "Mr. Robert, I told you that sometimes we do things without realizing it." Carl looked at me, evaluating me. "Did you sleep well, Dad?" I smiled. "Yes, son, very well." But inside I was counting the hours, because the plan was in motion, and they had no idea. 2 days later, Carl announced during breakfast, "Dad, we're having a special dinner on Saturday. I want to invite Gary, Mrs. Sanchez, some friends. A family gathering." He looked at me with that false smile. I knew exactly what that dinner was. It was the announcement. The moment he was going to tell everyone that I needed special care, that I was going to be institutionalized, that it was for my own good. I nodded calmly. "That sounds nice, son." Elaine looked at me surprised. I think she expected resistance, but I just smiled. That same afternoon, I called Scott from a payphone. "Scott, it's Saturday, the dinner. Do you have everything ready?" He replied confidently, "All set, Mr. Robert. Tim and I will arrive at 8:30, just as it's starting." Perfect. Saturday arrived. The house was bustling with activity, Elaine cooking, Carl tidying the living room. Gary came down from his room, somewhat surprised that there was a gathering. Mrs. Sanchez arrived with a cake. "Mr. Robert, so nice to see you." 2 more couples arrived, friends of Carl's whom I didn't know well. The table was set elegantly. Candles, wine glasses, everything very nice, very civilized. We sat down. Carl presided over the table. I was on his right, Gary on his left, Elaine across from me. The others were distributed around. We started dinner. Trivial conversation, the weather, the news. Gary talked about college, everything very normal. But I felt the tension. I knew Carl was waiting for the perfect moment. Dessert arrived. Carl wiped his mouth with his napkin. He cleared his throat. "Well, friends, family, I gathered you today because I want to share something important." The table fell silent. All eyes on him. Carl looked at me with that expression of false sadness he had practiced so well. "As you know, my dad has been living with us since my mom passed away. And, well, it's not easy to say this, but lately his mental health has deteriorated a little." Mrs. Sanchez nodded sympathetically. Gary frowned. Carl continued. He loses things. He hears noises that no one else hears. The doctor says he needs special care. And after thinking about it a lot, Elaine and I have decided that the best thing for him is— He paused dramatically. A place where he can be cared for professionally, where he will be safe. There were murmurs around the table. Gary looked at his father confused. Dad, are you putting Grandpa in a home? Carl raised his hands in a calming gesture. It's not putting him in a home, son. It's caring for him. It's giving him the attention he needs and that we can no longer— The doorbell rang. Loud, insistent. Carl stopped. He frowned. Who could that be at this hour? Elaine got up to open the door. I stayed seated, my heart pounding, but my face calm. The door opened. I heard voices. And then they entered the living room. Scott, in a formal suit and a tablet in his hand. Tim, with his leather briefcase and his imposing presence as a lawyer. Carl turned pale. Who are you? Tim spoke first. Clear, authoritative voice. Good evening. I am attorney Tim Barrett, counsel for Mr. Robert Mondragon. Carl stood up. Counsel? What are you talking about? Scott stepped forward. He connected his tablet to the living room television. Allow me to show you something. The screen turned on, and there it was. The recording. The black and white night image of that house's living room. The date and time in the corner. Everyone watched. And then the scene unfolded before their eyes. Carl coming downstairs, turning off the light, Fred entering. The murmurs, the movements, the chains. Everything. With clear audio. The unmistakable words. Move his glasses to the bathroom. Put the chains in the backyard. Just a few more days, and we institutionalize him. The silence in that room was absolute. When the video ended, no one moved. Mrs. Sanchez had her hand over her mouth in horror. Gary looked at his father with eyes full of tears. Dad, what did you do? Elaine tried to stand up, but Tim blocked her way. Sit down, ma'am. This is just beginning. Carl was white. Completely white. He tried to speak. It's a misunderstanding. I stood up. Slowly, everyone looked at me. I walked until I was in front of my son. I looked him directly in the eyes, and I spoke with a voice that did not tremble. A firm, dignified voice. The voice of the man I was and should never have stopped being. You tried to make me lose my mind, Carl. You tried to steal my house, my dignity, my sanity. You tried to bury me alive. I paused. But the one who lost his mind was you. Tim took some documents from his briefcase. We have 3 formal complaints here, one for fraud, another for illegal restraint of liberty, and another for psychological abuse against an elder. He handed the papers to Carl. He took them with trembling hands. We also have a temporary eviction order issued by a judge. You and your wife have 24 hours to vacate this dwelling while the case is investigated. Carl tried to protest. But this is my house. Tim looked at him with professional coldness. This house belongs to Mr. Robert Mondragon, who never voluntarily ceded the property. The documents you signed at the bank were obtained by deception, and we have testimony from the manager willing to testify about the irregularities of the process, Scott added. We also have an arrest warrant for Fred Rivers for breaking and entering and complicity in fraud, and an open investigation against Dr. Alan Harrison for medical negligence and complicity in an elder abuse scheme. Carl slumped into the chair. Elaine cried silently. The guests looked on in horror. Mrs. Sanchez approached me. Mr. Robert, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know anything about this. I took her hand. I know, Mrs. Sanchez. Gary got up abruptly. He ran out to the backyard. I followed him. I found him sitting on a bench, his face in his hands, crying. I sat next to him. "Grandpa, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." His voice was broken. I put my hand on his shoulder. "I know, son. I know." He looked at me with red eyes. "Dad told me you were confused, that you were mentally ill. I believed him, and that's why I stopped visiting you. That's why I stopped talking to you. I thought I was helping you by giving you space." He broke down again. "Forgive me, Grandpa. Forgive me for not realizing, for not asking you how you were." I hugged him. That hug we hadn't shared in months. "You have nothing to forgive, Gary. You were also a victim of this. Your father manipulated you just like me." We stayed there for a while, hugging, while inside the house, Carl's world was collapsing. That same night, Carl and Elaine packed their suitcases. Tim remained present to ensure they didn't take anything that wasn't theirs. Gary decided to stay with me. "Grandpa, if you let me, I want to stay with you. I don't want to be with them." I nodded. "This is your house, son. It always was." Carl walked past me before leaving. He looked at me. For a second, I saw something in his eyes. Regret? Shame? I don't know. But I no longer felt rage, only a deep sadness. Because that man who was leaving was my son. And despite everything he did to me, a part of me would always remember him as the child he was. But that part no longer had power over me. The following week, Fred was arrested. They found him in New Jersey trying to hide at a cousin's house. The evidence from the recordings was irrefutable. Dr. Harrison lost his license while the Medical Review Board investigated his case. Several of his patients began reporting similar irregularities. Tim helped me revoke all the powers of attorney I had signed. My house was still mine. My money was still mine. And my mind, that mind they tried to destroy, was clearer than ever. I returned to my house in Brooklyn. Gary came with me. The house smelled stuffy, abandoned. But we opened the windows, we cleaned. And little by little, we brought it back to life. I started walking again through the streets of downtown, through my beloved New York. And people greeted me again. "Mr. Robert, good to see you." "Professor, we thought you were sick." "Professor Mondragon, we missed you." One day, walking through the park, I ran into Mrs. Sanchez. She looked embarrassed. "Mr. Robert, I want to apologize. Carl lied to me. He told me you were confused, and I, without asking, told other neighbors. I contributed to isolating you." I looked at her. "Mrs. Sanchez, you had no way of knowing. The deception was very well executed." She had tears in her eyes. "Even so, I should have asked. I should have talked to you directly." I squeezed her hand. "Now you know. And that's what matters." One afternoon, sitting in my living room, I took out Grace's photo, the same one I had carried in my wallet during all those dark months. I looked at it for a long time. "I told you, my love. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. I fought, just like you taught me to fight." I smiled at that photo. And I won. I put the photo back in its usual place, on the living room mantelpiece, next to the photos of our wedding, of Carl when he was a child, of all our life together. Because despite everything, those memories were still good, and no one could take them from me. Gary came into the living room. "Grandpa, are you okay?" I nodded. "Yes, son, I'm okay." Scott came to visit me often. We would sit and drink coffee and talk about books, about life, about everything. One day he told me, "Mr. Robert, do you know what impacted me the most about all of this?" I shook my head. "That you never stopped looking for the truth, even when everyone told you that you were crazy, even when you had no one on your side. You kept searching. That's what you taught me in your class 20 years ago, and that's what saved you. I smiled at him. Scott, there is a phrase I always told my students. The truth always comes out. You just have to have patience and faith in yourself. He nodded. And I believe you, Mr. Robert. That's why I'm here. Tim helped me with all the legal procedures. The lawsuit against Carl and Elaine was ongoing. They would probably receive probation and community service. I didn't want them to go to jail, not for them, but for me. Because I had learned that revenge cures nothing. What cures is justice, and justice had already been served. Gary asked me one day, "Grandpa, will you ever forgive my dad?" I thought about it. I don't know, son. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it mean letting it happen again. He nodded. I understand. And I knew that young man was going to be fine, because he had learned something that many never learn, that love does not justify abuse. If you are listening to this story so far, I want to tell you something important. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you are 80 years old like me, or 20 like my grandson. If something doesn't feel right in your life, if you feel like something is wrong, even if everyone tells you otherwise, trust your instinct. I almost lost my house. I almost lost my dignity. I almost lost my freedom. But I didn't lose my mind, because deep down I knew. I knew something was wrong, and I didn't stop looking for the truth. And if you are going through something similar, please don't keep quiet. Seek help. Talk to someone. There is always, always someone who will believe you. There is always a Scott, a Tim, someone who will listen to you. Today, several months later, I am sitting in my living room writing this. Gary is in his room studying. The house smells like freshly brewed coffee. Outside, I hear the birds, and I am at peace. It wasn't easy to get here. There were nights when I thought I wouldn't make it, when I thought I really was losing my mind. But I resisted, and I won. Not because I am special, but because I didn't give up. And that is something anyone can do. Not giving up, continuing to believe in yourself, continuing to seek the truth. So I ask you, did you ever distrust someone close to you and they told you that you were crazy? Did you ever feel like everyone was against you? If this story touched your soul, leave me a comment. Tell me your experience, and please, subscribe. Every story I upload could be the one someone needs to hear, the one that can save someone from what I went through. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for believing in me. And remember, never, ever let anyone tell you that your reality is not valid. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.